What's good, fam? Happy Wednesday, everybody. I hope you're having a great day. If you're watching this and you notice it's What's Good Wednesday, but we're sitting on the couch because we have a very special guest in the house today. We have my father, Willie Robertson, bandana and all, who didn't get the memo that this was like a full body shot. He was thinking more Zoom.
Shockingly for some people, thinking I didn't even mess with this, but I didn't know potentially my legs showing.
So
I was unprepared.
Looking, pretty nice from waist up, and then some camo shorts and his rainbow.
These are actually swimming shorts, and not prepared. But then you laid this pillow out, and I thought it could just be an extension of my beard. Well, now it's just like I'm sitting here with no shirt on either, just swimming trunks. So.
That is terrible. So if you're listening to this and not watching this, you're going to have to go check this out on YouTube later to get the full effect. Also, if anyone from Hokas happens to be watching this, no one has more Hokas than this man right here. So if you're looking for some sponsor deals, he's the guy.
Oh, yeah.
He's the guy. Sure. You would definitely think that you're sponsored by Hoka, by the way, because his whole closet, it's like ridiculous. How many pairs?
I like the shoes I have. How many pairs that I have out of the box or that I still have in the box? Oh my gosh. Well, I made myself a deal. You speak a lot. I speak a lot. Every event I did, I wanted to have a new pair of shoes.
That is hilarious.
But I started doing way too many events. So
yeah, you do a lot of events.
So now I have to mix in some others. But I do like the way
He loves the Hoka lifestyle.
They help with my shins and
You rock them. You definitely rock them. But I'm excited for him to be on the podcast today. We're going to talk a lot about his childhood and life and all the things because there's a new movie coming out September 28th called The Blind. If you haven't heard us talk about this yet or seen it on social media, it's a story about his dad, my Papa Phil's life before the Dynasty, which I guess you can really attest to this. Y'all's life didn't always look like a dynasty.
Well, no, and not just Phil's life, but Kay's life.
Yes.
And actually my life, because I'm actually on the film.
Yeah. Played
by John Shepard, my grandson.
So sweet.
Your nephew at 2 years old.
Which is really sweet.
Isn't that cool? Yeah. So it's fun watching him. And so that's kind of the time frame. So we're talking about around 50 years ago, this time frame. And no, it wasn't. Watching the movie, for me, it's difficult, and I really felt bad for mom and dad because it's like you're taking the worst part of your life and then, burning it in pictures and screens, to live forever. So it's difficult, and I know that was tough for them because, a lot of things in your past, you're like, hey, move on, and there's no record of wrongs, and there, you have no past, only a future, and so, but here we kind of dwell on that time, I think, to show the impact. One, how close it was for there never being a dynasty, never being Duck Commander, never, having anything that came out. Who knows? You may not exist if that were the case. And so you just realize how close it was in our life. And obviously, for my life, I'm so glad that was able to work out. But really how close it is for a lot of people's lives. And some don't,
Yeah.
They don't, they're not rescued by the gospel, and they don't, and their lives fall apart, or people pass away, or, they overdose and all these kind of things. And so you realize how important it is for that life change to happen. So that was one just real sobering thought. And it's a lot different than Duck Dynasty because now you're seeing, once there's been redemption, once there's been life change, and once we've lived our lives like this, and so you see fun and comedy and family and prayer at the end of a show. But this is back when it was like it was bad, and so the marriage, my parents' marriage, was essentially over. Phil had kicked us out of the house. He's just not a good guy, and I think Kay at that point was searching for something. She obeys the gospel. And thankfully, Dad's sister, my Aunt Jan, who's passed away now as well, just had this real burning heart for God, even at a young age, and just never gave up on her brother. And so she goes and begs this preacher to go up to this, bar and actually talk to Phil. And so that's in the movie. And And so Phil hears the gospel. He's not like he doesn't even respond. In fact, he probably doesn't even want to hear it. But that's the way the gospel does. When it gets in people's hearts, you let the Holy Spirit work. And it wasn't until he'd really come to the end of himself and just was desperate and alone and had lost everything. And that's when that seed that was planted, he's like, I want to go. I need to know more about that. And so, that's that movie of really kind of how they grew up. And so you start to understand even stuff with my grandmother, Granny, who you have some memory of, but not a lot. And I sure do, because she was great, although she had mental illness. And so there was a lot of difficulties and challenges. And Phil and them were in extreme poverty. And so just the way they grew up. And, I think it's remarkable, really just coming out of and ended up being successful in business and obviously TV and all that from where they came from. So that's impressive as well, outside of the faith aspect of it. Just really coming out and changing, a link in a chain that was looking like it was just desperateness. And so, it's powerful. And I think the reason Phil, it's kind of like Duck Dynasty, like when I first approached him about doing television, and he was just like a hard no, like, nah, nobody's going to watch this, or it's not. And I told him then, I said, well, Dad, I think it could be a bigger platform for us to get the gospel out. Yeah. When I said that, he said, well, if it'll get the gospel out, then I'll do it. We did Duck Dynasty. Obviously, that's happened, not just through the show, but also through the podcast, through all the things, the books that came out of that. Now this movie that also comes out of that. So the movie was the same way. It's like, if we can show this and show how you were and show how your family was and how you had really messed everything up through sin and damage and all that, and show that you can be redeemed. And I think at that thought, he's like, well, if it helps somebody share their faith and or be open to the gospel, receptive, and that changed. And it's so remarkable, Sadie, that when I think about, especially what you're doing and what the impact that you have and the reach you have and the people that listen, the books you've written and all that, all the things that you do, if you start backtracking this and you go all the way back 50 years ago, down to a couple that was in Junction City, Arkansas, that had no money, no fame, it's like nothing going for themselves. There was a decision made right there that could have went one way or the other. And because that faith was instilled in them, because they obeyed the gospel, because they changed their life radically, it helped immediately the three boys, which I was the youngest at the time. And if it would have been just for that, it would have been worth it. It would have been like, hey, our family's together. But once you start taking that forward, then Duck Commander comes out, is able to run as a business, Duck Dynasty. My whole life changed in that. Now I'm going to a church camp, which I wouldn't have been going to a church camp because we didn't go to church. That's where I met Mom. Yeah. That's where our family, all the other families, all that came around to Duck Dynasty. Hundreds of millions of people all over the world were exposed to a prayer at the end of a show that had an impact. Now there's books. Now this movie, your podcast, everything you're doing. None of that happens. Like literally hundreds of millions of people expose that. None of that happens. You go back to that couple right there. Yeah. If that guy doesn't go up there and preach the gospel. Yeah. If Dad's sister says he is too far gone. Even if Mom says, I can't get over it, I'm not willing to try. And so that inspires me, knowing that the impact of what God can do just from that story, that inspires me to say, you never know who. Yeah. So you never give up on anybody, because when it's at its worst, you're like, there's no way this can get better. Just let the gospel in there. Let the Holy Spirit work. Let it, and then watch how it can change lives. I baptized this guy, I think last year, and I said, well, this will really have an impact on your kids. And he said, Willie, I don't have any kids. And I said, but you may have kids. Yeah. And if you do have kids, this will impact their lives. Generational. Because now once you change your life, you should have a whole different outlook on life and become a new person.
That's good.
And that will directly affect your kids. So
it's good. Gosh, it's so powerful and for so many different reasons. And we could pick apart each different person's story in the movie, and it can relate to someone here listening, whether you're in Pep Field's position and you're really far gone and you're living a life of sin and you feel stuck in that and you're kind of hit rock bottom, this movie's for you. Or if you're like Jan, you're the sister who's believing for someone who is far gone. You're thinking there's nowhere they're going to turn, but you keep believing, you keep putting the right people in their life. Or you're in the marriage that's falling apart and you're the wife and you're believing for your husband, but he's not coming back. Like, this movie, it hits so many different people's lives and stories.
You have to get over. Can you shine that? You could be one of us, the kids. It's not fair.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't fair to us as little kids.
Yeah.
For our parents to be like that, for them to have gotten themselves in that spot, for dad to be mean and unkind and not there for us and all that. And so either we could have lived in that and just said, well, life wasn't fair, and so it messed us up.
Y'all, time just flies by when you have kids. It's like 1 minute they're just born and they're a little baby, and the next minute they're a couple months old and they're growing out of their newborn clothes. And that's where we are with Haven. She is growing out of those newborn clothes, getting into those 3-month clothes, and she also is starting to find her hands. She has discovered where her hands are, and finally she can start hitting little things. She wants to hold little things, so it's so fun to watch our girls, both of them, grow, and I can't wait to see all the things that they are going to step into in their next season. And KiwiCo is actually an amazing company that helps them, get all these fun things in the seasons that they're stepping into. KiwiCo is awesome if you haven't heard of it. It's a subscription for kids that encourages play and brain building activity, even in newborns like Haven. Their Panda Crate is designed for newborns and toddlers, and it has up to 6 products that are perfect for supporting development at that age, which I actually remember when I was had Honey and she was like 2 months old. I literally Googled what to do with a 2-month-old because I was like, what do I do? Like, I feel like she wants to do something, but I don't know what to do. So it's nice to have something like this where it can help you, actually know what to do and give them something fun, even at 2 months old. Kids learn and grow so much in those first 2 years, and believe me, it happens fast. Like I mentioned, the Panda Crate helps babies at every stage develop new skills and engage their senses by doing what kids do best, playing and exploring. And we all want to keep our kids safe, am I right? And that's why I love that every product in the Panda Crate is made with non-toxic, high-quality materials, so I can just focus on enjoying watching Haven meet her milestones. One thing that comes in the Panda Crate is black and white cards, and that was one of Honey's favorite things. Pro travel tip, we used to always bring her black and white cards on the plane, and Honey would just literally stare up, and I would just show her the different black and white cards, and it kept her entertained the whole flight. So definitely going to be incorporating that with Haven. It's so cute when Haven locks eyes with you or notices something, her eyes get really big, and those black and white cards really help with that. So foster brain building play with KiwiCo right now. Get 50% off your first month. Y'all, did you hear me say that? 50% off your first month plus free shipping at kiwico.com. Promo code Sadie Rob. That's 50% off your first month plus free shipping at KiwiCo, KiwiCo.com. Promo code Sadie Rob. KiwiCo.com. Promo code Sadie Rob. Go check it out.
So yeah, you can find yourself in that story somewhere. Are you the guy? Yeah. Are you the preacher? Are you someone who may need to go talk to someone?
Yeah.
Like, you may be thinking of someone right now going, I really need to talk to my sister. I need to talk to my cousin. Or I need to talk to that friend or that boyfriend or girlfriend, whoever that is. Do I need to just go have a conversation?
Yeah.
Because that guy got in a car and drove to a bar, which is very uncommon for preachers to do, across state lines.
Yeah.
And even when I think about that, I think about like pastors, and I think, would you go somewhere? He wasn't even from the area, so it wasn't like he's gonna be in his church. He didn't have any money. It wasn't like, he's literally going just to try to help this guy because he knows her sister. That's it. And that was a lot. I'm so thankful, and I was able to obviously hang out with him a lot throughout life. That very same preacher, and actually hear those stories. So yeah, I think you can
that's such a good point too, because I think that a lot of times, especially people who are younger, they want to do ministry, but they think of ministry as being a platform or a stage or something big, Mm-hmm. But ministry is sharing the gospel with people, right? Ministry is going and telling. And this guy who is a pastor went and drove to Junction City, Arkansas to a bar, which might have seemed like insignificant ministry if you're going to compare ministry to a stage or whatever you think it is.
Or even scary ministry.
And scary, yeah, intimidating. Like, you're going into a rough bar to a man who is like rough,
unstable,
violent,
yeah,
drunk, and sharing the gospel. But yet that man 50 years later has reached like millions of people with the gospel because of this pastor getting in the car and driving. And so, and his sister praying and asking the pastor to go and doing all that. And then his wife forgiving him for all of that and staying with him. It really is the most powerful story. And I think it's so cool that you shared, like, this doesn't feel like Duck Dynasty. It doesn't feel like the comedy and the funny. I mean, there is Uncle Si in there who it's kind of fun to see him as a kid, and some funny things about, you know, the three of them going on dates together and whatnot. So there's some sweetness. There's a dinner table scene, some sweet things, but it's not funny. It's hard. But I think what's really cool is most people listening or who are going to go see it have seen the funny. They've seen the family. And what I've gotten a lot of times is like, you know, oh, if I had a family like yours, then that would be really awesome. Or like, you know, I don't even know what that even looks like your family, because people look at our family and it's like, wow, they're all together and they're happy, and like people can't relate to that sometimes. But I think it's really cool to say, no, we can relate. Like, there was a time.
Yeah, when you see this movie, you'll say, oh, that may look more like
that might look more like my family. And that's hard. And the reality is that is really hard. But look what can happen when the gospel takes place. Like, this was a family who had gone through poverty and abuse and drunkenness and all this stuff, and mental illness through Peppa Phil's mom and how that affected the kids. But like, look at what God has done with that story. And I'm about to preach this sermon coming up. I'm actually preaching it at conference, but
I heard
the whole thought of this is that there's a moment in everyone's life, and when you look at the Bible, I mean, it's crazy. Don't want to preach the whole sermon here, but when you look at the Bible, there is a moment in every story of the Bible and a moment in every story of our life that it looks like you're stuck. It looks like you're stuck in a situation. There's no way out. And it's normally in the position where you're stuck that you either do one of two things. You either trust the Lord, and you're in a moment of being stuck, and it's right before his glory is crazily revealed in your life, or it's a moment that you're stuck and you stay stuck, and it's a place you stay to die. And there are stories in the Bible where they feel stuck and they get panicked, and it's like, oh, we're gonna die here and all this stuff. But then there's these moments right before, in that panicky moment, that God comes and they trust the Lord, and God brings them out and his glory is revealed. And this is a prime example of that it looks like it's the end, it's over. When you see the movie, there is like a hard time period where he is like so far gone, but it's in that moment that instead of like staying there to die, he let God's glory be revealed in his life, and he accepted that forgiveness and started walking with it. And I just want to ask you, so you were a kid and Peppa Phil's life just all of a sudden changes, and he comes back living with y'all because they were separated. And what did that, if you remember, do you remember like the stage from he was so bad to now he's living with y'all? Was there like some weirdness, some awkwardness? Was it like full force? What did that look like?
I don't remember. The only, Phil I remember is the good side of Phil. However, I did sense, like I knew, even as a young child, I sensed and I could feel something that changed. I could hear stories or hear the tone when they talked or whatever. And Phil was so open, like, because he immediately started sharing his faith. So it wasn't like he started this later. I could hear him sharing his faith, and then he would reference what he came out of. So I heard that a lot. And so, but fortunately for me, I don't remember any of that. But again, I knew that there was something. You were talking about getting stuck. It reminded me, and I'll tell you this little story. I don't even know if you remember this or were aware. So it was kind of like reality TV. So when we first started, this is before Duck Dynasty. This is the show called Duck Commander, I think, that was on Outdoor Channel. And we had our first day of shooting this reality show. And so I remember the night before our opening day, which was actually opening day of duck season, the night before Mom and I had stayed up, and we were counseling these people, and we were trying to help them. It ended up going way too late, like deep in the night, and it's kind of like when them just like, we've got this thing, and I'm going hunting, which is super early, but we just felt like we have to do this. This was where life took us at this point. I'll never forget this. I set my alarm on my phone, and for some reason my phone froze up at like 3:15, and it just didn't. It was still saying 3:15 a.m. So my alarm doesn't go off, so I don't wake up, and so I open my eyes, and I realize if I can see daylight, I'm way not where I'm supposed to be, because I was supposed to be at field out in the woods way pre daylight. And I open my eyes and I'm like, and I grab my phone and it's hung up. It says 3:15 a.m.
Oh my gosh.
So I like reboot the phone, and then when it comes up, there's a lot of text messages, like, where are you? We're starting. And so now I'll go back to the scene of where they was set. And this is about TV and kind of where you're stuck. It's like when you get to this place where it's like, oh no, everything's bad. In TV, I'd be like, that's probably what it needs to be about.
Yeah.
And so the scene down there is the camera crew's there. Everybody's ready. They're getting in the boat, and the production company hasn't realized at this point that I'm not there. So Phil's just telling them, Jace is telling them stuff. And so finally the director looks up and goes, hang on, where is Willie? like one of the main parts of this show, he's not here. Phil and Jace do not bat an eye. My dad does not. He just looks up and goes, I'm pretty sure he's still in bed asleep. Obviously, where else would he be? And they're like, well, we can't even film what we're going to film. We can't show it. And Phil could care less. He's like, well, we're going hunting. And so then back to me at like probably 8:30 in the morning. And I called Jace. I gave him on the phone and I said, Jace, I've got to come down there. Like, how do I get out there? And he goes, well, there's a little, like we call them P-Rows. They're tiny little boats. Get that and paddle out here. So I go to the place. I drive down there. I get the place. It's the tiniest. It's maybe the size of like part of this couch. I mean, it's literally tiny. And so I thought,
like paddleboard.
I think it was like a serving tray, like you would put it on a table.
That's hilarious.
And I'm thinking, well, I guess that's what he wants me to get in. So I get this thing, and it's just full of Willie. There's anywhere else to go, and I've got my stuff. And I had this little teeny tiny paddle, and every time I would go once, it would like throw me this way and throw me. And so I start out, and I've got my phone. I put it in a baggie, but I'd pull it because I was like, I'm gonna tomp in this thing. So I called him like, I'm paddling out. Don't shoot me, because I'm coming out through the woods because I could hear him calling and shooting. And when I pop out in this little boat, and everybody looks, go, what is he in? And so it turns out it's something that you pull behind, like if you were walking through the water, you would like put your things in there.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Not meant for a human being to do. In fact, it was so impressive. They all tried it later. No one could get in it without it tumping over. So the first show, that was the show.
Yeah.
So where we got stuck and was like, the show is over, like we're not going to be able to film, ended up being me in the teeny tiny boat. Because Phil said it just looked like I was on the water. You couldn't even see the boat. And that's what made the show.
That's
so
so
sometimes
good.
it's where we get stuck at is actually what you probably need to be focused on outside the plans that you had, and so it reminded me of that.
Good. That's so true, because that's the heart of the message, is that the place that you think you're stuck at, that you appear to be stuck, might actually be where God's planned you to be so that his glory can be revealed. So friends, if you follow me, you know that I love ministry. Everything I do is to tell others about Jesus, and I love being a part of other people's ministries too. And that's why I'm excited to tell y'all about Cru if you haven't already heard me talking about it. Cru has missionaries in nearly every country on earth, and their goal is to help people come to know Jesus. And they're seeing it happen everywhere. But y'all, there is a lot more to be done, because all of those people in all these different places need a Bible in their own language. Reading my Bible is such a source of hope and inspiration to me, as many of you know, and I can't imagine not having access to one or not even being allowed to own one. So we want to help others have that in their own life, because a lot of people don't. So for only $21 a month, you can provide 3 people with Bibles every month. And also, as a thank you, with that $21 a month, Crew will provide meals to 5 hungry people through their aid ministry, which is just amazing. And plus, you'll get a free copy sent to you of my devotional book, Live on Purpose. Live on Purpose is a devotional book just reminding you about the purpose that God has you right where you're at. And so if you are someone that struggles with knowing your purpose, finding your purpose, this will be a great book for you to read and just start living the life God has for you. So many of you have also already signed up from this podcast ad running, and I just want to say thank you so much for doing that. It seriously means a lot, and you're making a change around the world. But of course, there is still work to do, so Crew needs more Bibles and more prayers to continue their work sharing Jesus with everyone on earth. And I know we can do this, y'all, so thank you for rallying. Let's keep rallying. Simply just text Huff, that's Huff, to 71326 to help today. Just imagine how much this gift could truly change someone's life. So just text Huff, Huff, to 71326. That's Huff, 71326 to help now, or visit give.cru.org/Huff. Message and data rates may apply. Available to U.S. addresses only. Like, when you think about it, I mean, let's go, Joseph stuck in prison, but he wasn't stuck in prison. He was supposed to be there so that the people in the palace could see him and elevate him to that position. Daniel stuck in a lion's den, not really stuck, to get eaten by a lion, but so that he could get out of the den and God's glory be revealed. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stuck in a fire, not really stuck to be burned, but so that the fourth man could be revealed. Paul stuck in prison, but not stuck to just sit in chains, but so that he could sing and worship to the prisoners and the guards. And you just look at this, and Jesus in the tomb, but not meant to stay there so that he could bust out of the tomb. And I mean, you just go through story after
Peter
story after
stuck in a boat after he's denied knowing who Jesus is. And I think he's just out there going, that's it.
Well, it's
I
over.
missed it.
It's over.
Like, I had it all set up. This is the way it was supposed to be, and I blew it. And he even said I was going to blow it, and I still blew it, knowing that he said that. And now he's in a boat, and Jesus was like, comes back to it. And hey,
it's right when you think you're stuck that God's about to do something. But you got to trust him. You got to have I see that. And I love how when you think about all these people who were stuck, they didn't just sit there and act stuck. Like, Joseph was still interpreting dreams. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were having faith to walk in the fire. Paul was still worshiping and praising and all these things. Now, Peter, we don't know what Peter's intentions were. Maybe he was going back to what he always knew. Maybe he was sitting around waiting. We don't really know. I think that relates to so many different people. Sometimes when we feel stuck, we trust the plan. We trust it's a part of the process. Sometimes we're doubting the plan. Sometimes we're like the Israelites and we're like, should we just go back to what we knew because it looks like we're stuck? And so it's in those moments of being stuck that you get to decide what you do with that. Like, you didn't have to get on that little serving tray and powder yourself out there. That could have been end of the story, whatever. But that's what made the show so funny, is that you decided, I'm gonna do this.
I wasn't even trying. That's just, they didn't realize the boat had moved, and that was sitting there. No one ever dreamed anyone would even attempt to do that. And so I literally thought, I guess this is it. It's a one man boat, and
you gotta.
And I don't think I could do it to this day. I don't think I could get in there and do that and pull that off. So
it's a good point of, like, you got to work what you got when you're stuck. And I gotta ask you this. Anyways, and I think this is kind of a good point, a good time to bring it up. So when y'all were kids, even though the life had changed, Phil's life had changed, your marriage is getting better, everything is good in a sense, y'all still didn't have any money. And there was, y'all were poor, and so you're sitting here and you could have stayed stuck in the fact that you don't have money, but you were working what you got. You definitely worked what you have. And I think that that's really cool to bring up, because you did end up taking over the business, and you and Mom have done such a great job with Duck Commander and Duck Dynasty. But way before you started, helping Phil sell duck calls, you were selling some other things. So tell us what little kid Willie was doing, working what you got in the season you were in.
Yeah, I tell this story all over the country, and especially business, and people wonder, like, because the question will be like, how did you become the CEO and of this company? And I say it goes all the way back to, like, when I was in 4th grade and 5th grade. I had a really good work ethic, and so we learned how to work hard, and so we were working, and I was, we would do a lot of stuff for Duck Commander. Like, we were the employees, and it was like child labor, but Dad never like gave us any money. So it wasn't like, it was all the greater purpose and electricity. Yeah. We got to have food, and so you're paying for your part, which was fine. But I was like, I get some cash, if I had some cash in my hand. So I started this. My first business was a worm farm.
Worm farm.
And so I had this, Dad had this old boat, and it was like it's submerged in the creek. And so I pulled it out, and I put it up on sawhorses, and I filled it up with cow manure.
No, I've never heard this.
Yeah, Phil said worms love cow manure. So you've been down there. So about a mile up the road where that pasture is, there were cows back in the day. And so I did a wheelbarrow. We didn't have a buggy, or we didn't, and I was in 4th grade, so I wasn't driving. So I did a wheelbarrow that whole mile road.
Oh my!
And I filled it up. I dumped it in there. Filled it up. Dumped it in there. Like one after another.
No way.
Filled it up. Went and found all the worms, and I had thousands of worms in there. And I would put cornmeal, and then I had it covered up with like old sheets of plywood. I'd water it, a certain time. And then when the fishermen would come on Saturdays, in the early Sunday morning, I would set up a sign. It would say worms, 5 cents a piece. And so I would dig them out. And I had all my cans. So I had every corn can, like all the cans that we had used, like canned goods.
Hilarious.
And so I'd fill them up and put dirt in there. So I did that, and I made some money, not great. But then the big break was in 5th grade. Yeah, this was amazing. So this guy came down. So there were always people coming down to our house, because we were at the end of a dead end road. Phil made these duck calls. So kind of word had gotten out that, Phil was making these duck calls. They were selling, but so it was like people would come through town. So this dude came down. He was like, he wanted his duck call, or he wanted it worked on or something. And he was telling us he was a candy distributor. And so I didn't know what a distributor. And I remember asking him, what is a distributor? And he said, well, I sell the candy, which I heard candy. I was like, hey, I'm all over that. He goes, I sell it to the gas stations where you buy it, but I'm the one, then they become the retailer. And so it was like my whole educational business was like right here. I was like, oh, that's brilliant, And so as he's leaving, he hands, I think Phil, he hands them a box of Hubba Bubba bubble gum. And he goes, here, this is for the boys. Well, you want to talk about the right place at the right time. I'm standing right there, and I've been asking this guy questions. So Phil just hands it to me. I think Phil's idea was like I was going to distribute it to my brothers, but that was not what I had in mind. So I took it to my room, and so I just laid on my bed, and I just remember staring at it. I just couldn't believe I had it. It was like, it was like my precious. I was like, what do I do with this? And so I was considering, do I just chew my face off, just one after another and blow these giant bubbles? But then I decided, what if I became like a retailer? What if I just sold it? I'm mobile. I've got a school. I've got a target audience. And the school didn't sell gum. In fact, they kind of frowned on even chewing gum. Mm-hmm. And so I got on the school bus. I remember that first, I had a pack, and I said, well, we'll see how this goes. I mean, I'm sold out by the time I get to the end of the street. I'm like, oh man. So I blitzed through that really quickly. So I went back to Mom, and because now I got some more money. I'm still doing the worms, but I'm doing this. So I'm getting a little money. And I said, Mom, you got to take me up to the big, they call it cash and carry. It was like where you could buy bulk size. So I bought, and pretty much I studied what the concession stand had, and I just bought other stuff that they didn't have. So it was gum. It was all these other flavors that my selection looked more like the gas station, not the concession stand.
Where'd you have it set? Did you have it in your locker?
So in my locker, so I had these, I brought bricks, I would bring bricks and boards to school, and I built shelving in my locker.
Way.
So I didn't have any books. It was just all that. And I had candy, so I would open my locker and I would sell stuff out. And then I would have it in my pockets. And so I started wearing big coats all the time. And I'm dealing. And it wasn't like I was hiding. I was I'm just making money. Well, concession stand back then, school ended at 3. Concession stand was $2.40. So it was the last 20 minutes of the day. Well, I mean, I basically got everybody's money. By the time that happens, they're out. This is before nobody had an account. You got to think think back. It's not like your parents put it was everything was cash, and I pretty much had everybody's money in the school by then. So the principal, the concession stand had met with the principal, and they were like, "We're not selling anything. I don't know what's happening, but something has happened. Nobody's buying any of the candy. We're just So he starts asking around. Sure enough, it's
so funny.
Willie Robertson's selling everything. He's selling gum. He's selling all this stuff. And my teacher knew about it, and because she called me the Little Tycoon. That was her nickname for me. Because, I mean, I'm rolling around. I got a wad of money now all the time, you know. I got change, you know, because I got to make change for everybody. And so he calls me in his office, and it was fifth grade. He came over the intercom. So I'm walking down the hallway. I'd never been in trouble. And I walk in his office, and I don't know what he's going to, you know, like. And so I walk in there, and so I'm like, I don't know if he said, Willie, are you selling stuff out of your locker, candy and gum? And at this point, I'm like, does he want me to teach a class? Does he want me to like present something to the school? Does he want consulting work, you know, for the, you know, I don't know what he's getting at. And he said, well, I just met with a concession stand, and they told me they're not selling anything. And so he said, you can't do that anymore. Like, no more selling anything at Pinecrest School. And I'm just, you know, I was crushed. I was like, what am I going to do? You know, like, because then I had gotten, you know, all this money. I was like, what am I going to do now? So you know, so I didn't know what I was going to do. I was like, you know, I said it was my first run-in with the government, you know, that's trying to shut me down. So then I ended up coming up with other things that I tried to do, and seeing that I couldn't sell things. And that ultimately led to the Human Jukebox.
My favorite business you ever had.
So that was on the school bus, same year. I mean, it pretty much started right after that, and I did that for several years. And I would pop up on the back of the seat, and Miss Leonard was the school bus driver, and she'd be yelling at me, you know, sit down, you know. But I'd be up, and so I would mechanically make myself say, all right, the Human Jukebox is now here, and so the kids would put like a quarter in my armpit. And I would mechanically drop it in my hand, put it in my pocket, and they would like punch on my chest, and they would whisper what song they wanted me to sing. And so I'd memorized all these songs from your Uncle Alan's 8-track tapes.
No
and
way.
So I always had this big stereo and had all these 8-track tapes, and I mean, I wore them out, and the music would start bleeding over each other. It would be like kind of, but and the main one they always wanted to hear was he had Foreigner. And so it was Jukebox Hero, which is funny because I was the Human Jukebox.
So funny.
And so I would sing this song, and I'd be like up and down the aisle. And then she'd be screaming at me. The bus driver would be like, sit your butt down, you know, you can't be. And I'd be like, standing in the rain with his head hung low. And so everybody.
It's so good.
So it kind of just became this thing that it just was entertaining.
It's so
because I was on that school bus forever.
It's so
because you know how far down
Yeah.
that house is. So we were like the first ones they picked up and the last ones they dropped off. And so
you gotta work what you got.
So I'd make my quarters. And
you gotta work what
wasn't
you got.
as lucrative as the candy and gum
I
business.
love it so much because we talked about this before on the podcast, and there's a sermon out that I did a couple years ago about how like what God was doing in your life back then was really preparing you for where you are now. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing when you look back and you see his hand in all the things. You know, in the time you can't really see what each thing is purpose for, but then you look back and you say, whoa, you really did work all things together for good.
Right.
And when you look at yourself as a kid, I mean, you're learning business, you're selling things, you're singing, all these different things, which fast forward to now, I mean, you run this business, Duck Commander, you're on TV, you're entertaining people, you were on The Masked Singer, you literally sang songs, like all the things that God was just kind of cultivating you as a child, like is really something that you've gotten to do as an adult, which I just think is really special.
And nothing was wasted.
Nothing was wasted, not a single
It's like when I cook, and you know I cook a lot.
Oh yeah.
And so I love when I'm cooking is that nothing's really wasted. Like I'll take this, I'll cook bacon that's going to go in this, and then I'll use what was left on that, and then I'll cook that down. And so I love a meal where I'm like at the end, it's like, what did you toss away? It was like nothing, everything.
That's so cool.
Even the vegetables that got cut, we cooked those down and then used the juice from that. And so in life, as I look back, it's like a big pot of gumbo. It's like nothing got wasted. Everything had some flavor or something that I was able to use. Because I remember a time in my life when I was like, I feel like I started too late, or I didn't, you know, I should have got a different degree and all that. So there were times in my life that, you know, that I was like, I just wasted this time. But now as life came around, I'm still telling stories of things that happened that weren't wasted at all. Which is just amazing, is to be able to do that. And you mentioned earlier about ministry, which is what I wanted to do, was be in ministry, and didn't know which way to go. So I was like, do I become a minister, or is there something else? Which mom going to college made me go to college if I wanted to be with her at that point. And so doing that, and then was able to minister to a lot of people. But as I read the New Testament, there was a lot of smaller ministry is small things. Like you mentioned, the pastor goes to the bar, this conversation. Most of the things in the New Testament are just these small, especially in the book of Acts. It's just a few people. It's one person to one person. Jesus and the one with the well, or Philip and the Ethiopian. So it's not these big, Acts 2 is a big grandiose thing, but a lot of these things were just small things. And so as I think about our lives, it's not always, I think some people are like, oh, I guess you can do this because you have this big platform. But really the things we're doing now is no different than what we did then.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that so much. I love that you said that all things can work together and nothing is wasted, because I think a lot of people who are listening to this podcast are in their 20s, and it kind of is the years of like, oh, did I mess this up? Did I waste my time? What am I going to do? Is it going to be this or is it going to be that? And I just love that. I don't feel like God is, it's not like God's waiting on you to decide, is it this or that? He's in it all. So whatever you do, I love that verse, whatever you do, do it as if you're working for the Lord, not for men. So that's whatever. And when you look back at your life, I mean, even in college, like you said, you got a different degree. You got a PE degree, and then you wanted to like start a bowling alley, and you wanted to be a professional Scrabble player. And like, I hear all these stories, and you wanted to do ministry, vocational ministry, and all these different things. But like, none of it was wasted. Like, all of it made you who you are today, and also makes for some awesome stories to tell about
you know where I see God at work? You know where it's easiest for me to see God at work, or what God did? Looking backwards.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's not looking forward.
Yeah.
Because when I talk to young people, and they've not just young people, I can talk to churches, and I can see it's like you've got it all planned out. I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, then I'm going to move here, then I'm going to have this. So it's like we're looking forward. I'm telling you, Sadie, as I've looked forward in life, I just, there's no way I could have seen any of this.
Yeah.
How was I supposed to say, like, when it's like, what's your 10-year goal? It wouldn't have included reality TV show and doing that. None of that. But as I look backwards, I can say, oh, I can see God working there. Then he did that. Then he did this. So sometimes I try to get out of the way, and rather than me plan everything, like I see it going, I just let God take wherever that's at and wherever I'm at, and the Holy Spirit. And then I just go along with that flow, and I can look backwards a lot and go like, wow, look at how that worked. And so sometimes I think we can really outthink ourselves by trying to plan it. And then when it doesn't happen, we're back stuck again.
Yeah, that's
and we're like,
true.
oh, I was supposed to go to college, and then I was going to do this, and then I was going to meet the guy, and then I was going to,
it's
and then when something happens, or then we were going to have kids at this point, and then boom, you can't have kids, or it's like, that takes longer, So even Mom and I, like we had you and John Luke, and then we're going to have the next one, and then all of a sudden, it didn't happen, and we were like, we're stuck.
Yeah.
Well, now we're open to adopting Will.
It's cool.
And had we had Bella, I don't know that we would have been open to that. And then we get Will, and then unstuck again, then we have Bella. So isn't it amazing, like when you look at that now, again, looking back, we can see that. Looking forward, it was hard to see that. It was like, it just looked like, this is a problem.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, and even in those times, we didn't have a lot of money. I think sometimes people think like, what's easier for y'all, your family, y'all have got money. I mean, these are back in times when, even when we adopted Will, we couldn't afford to pay the little payment that, the money of what it cost. And so we were literally just going with God and saying, he's going to work this out. And again, I can, I can look back and I think that's what, I think you can look back at your life and see all those things, and just don't try to plan everything how it's supposed to be, and how, because you can cloak it and you can say, well, God's going to be in all this, but just be careful when you're the one saying how God's going to do it all.
Boom. That's a word for a lot of people. including myself. That's so good. Recently we got a question sent into the podcast because we get questions all the time for, me and Mom do that series, and it's like a messy conversation about anxiety, a messy conversation about all these different kind of things. But someone recently was like, we all talk about how to share the gospel with someone. And when I saw that, I was like, well, I have the perfect person coming on the podcast for that. Because, even without even asking the question, if you went back and listened to this podcast, how many times did Dad say, sharing the gospel? Mm-hmm. When I told Phil we could share the gospel, then your heartbeat, for everything you do is like, can I share the gospel in it, And I think not a lot of people think about it like that. It's like, if I am in a church, then I'll share the gospel. Or if I'm at a small group, then I'll share the gospel. But you're like, wherever I am, whatever I do, whoever I'm talking to, I'm sharing the gospel. And I love that not only do you do that,
you're open to sharing
the gospel. You're not forceful. It's not everywhere. It's not awkwardly brought up.
I think sometimes people get weird and they just start.
It's not like that. Not like that. But you are always thinking if there's an opportunity, to share. And it comes up naturally with you. It's not like it's forced in a conversation. It's just such a part of your life that just comes up. But you just wrote a book that is not out yet, and that might be one of the first places that you announce this, but it's helping people do just that. And so tell us about the book and just your heart behind it.
Yeah, the book is called Gospeller,
so
pronounced
cool.
like that. It looks like Gospeller, but it's Gospeller, and it's simply one who shares their faith publicly or personally. And I just love the simple word. Mom actually found the word. It's an old word that was, and it was used in America a lot. It's like there's even, we found where it was written in laws and stuff, and which is kind of not ironic that you've never heard of this word anymore. Yeah. I'd never heard of it, probably because there's less people sharing their faith. Yeah. And so, because it was it's not a minister, it's not as a pastor, minister, preacher. It's not like that. It was just it could be any simple person that can share their faith. And so found that word. I was like, I think that's perfect. And it's turning darkness into light, one conversation at a time. And so, and I feel like that's what the gospel is. And so it's more than just listening to someone's problems or that's part of it. And that can be where it starts. But if you just listen and never offer any hope or never offer them a solution, if the guy would have driven to the bar and just Phil would have said, oh, and Mom would have said that our life's terrible, and been like, well, I hate it for y'all, I'll be thinking about y'all, and then goes back, drives back, and doesn't give any message. And so so we try to tackle the things of why they don't share their faith, and what are the things that happen. And so, and you hear a lot, like as I talk to people, they're like, well, I don't know the Bible well enough, and the Bible so well, and which I want to say, I'm not some professional preacher, I like to study the word because I want to be prepared that when I do talk to people, I don't want to have to call somebody and say, hang on, I don't know any of these answers, let me call someone. So there are things that we learn. Some people think, my life was so bad, I'm the last one to tell anybody else something. And then again, we go back to the New Testament and we read about these flawed people who had done terrible things in their life, like the Apostle Paul, like Peter, who had blown up. And we're seeing them sharing their faith, and they weren't perfect, but man, they were dedicated. And the main text is, from the New Testament is 1 Corinthians 15, 1-4. And so that's one that, you just got to read. And once you understand the importance, what Paul is saying, and it's weird because it's at the end of this book, it's at the end of 1 Corinthians, one of two letters that he's written. But he goes back and he just said, I need to remind you, of the gospel. Like don't forget what this is all about. Yeah. I preached to you which you received and on which you've taken your stand. And there's the message right there. How do we take our stand on the gospel? What does that look like to take your stand? I don't know. You probably may not have even thought about that. It's not just like, so I think people feel like, well, I got saved. How do you take your stand on the gospel? Wow. It said, otherwise you believed in vain, which is kind of a negative. And then he says it's of first importance. This is what's most important. this will save you. And then he actually calls what it is. Jesus died, he was buried, and he was raised.
Yeah.
That is the message. That's what's got to be the driver. Everything else will manifest itself from what Jesus did. So it's all about him. It's what God, the plan, what we did. And so the trick is then, how do you get that? And now I think about the Apostle Paul. Remember when he says, I pray that the mystery of the gospel can come out of my mouth more clearly.
Yeah.
What is he? So he's praying that this mystery, so nobody knew the gospel better than Paul. Why is he still praying that he can reveal this mystery even better? I think it's because he knew it wasn't resonating with some it would. And so he's like, where he says, you got to become all things to all men, to snatch them from the fire. So if I'm trying, like you guys as kids, when I was trying to teach y'all growing up, it wasn't always the same. Like I could tell you something, I'd have to maybe tell John Luke a different way, or Will something, to understand what that is. And so as I run into people, for some people it could be, they may feel hopeless. And so they're looking for hope. For some people it could be fear. For some people it could be sin. It could be any of that. Some people could totally not even believe. They just really struggle with doubt or even believing in God, and which is okay. Like, because the Great Commission, when Jesus said go and convert people, teach people, baptize people, right before that verse, he says he called the 11 up there, and still some doubted.
Yeah.
So it's okay.
That's always been.
Right. So I mean, even that was the 11.
Yeah.
Right. And Jesus, so he didn't stop and go like, hang on, start over.
Yeah.
And so whoever that is I'm talking to, so if I'm talking to somebody and they go, Willie, I have no faith. I don't believe in any of this. And I go, I get that. And so let's see if we can how could we say this? And that's where I could see Paul going, how can I? So he's praying, going, how can I come across to this person? Like Phil in the bar, like Jan is like going, what could I say? Well, she knew, she had probably told him that 100 times, but he wasn't listening.
Yeah.
So then she's like, well, maybe this guy, because this guy's passionate. Maybe she can speak to him in a different way. And sure enough, that was the combination. But also Phil then at that point had to say, I've got nothing left. So, if someone comes to me and is like, hey, I got arrested last night. I got a DWI. My marriage is on the rocks. I need a life change. Yeah. Well, that's a layup for the gospel. You know what I'm saying? Like that was like, okay, you need something or whatever. Somebody's just like, but it's even tougher for people that aren't necessarily searching. Now, I may just plant that seed and just leave it and just come back. And I don't, and at the end of the day, I'm not judging anyone. I'm just, and so then we go through, and in the book, I go through certain verses that I go through with people. They've been proven in that I'll share with you a bunch of the stories of me just talking to people. And so this conversation happened here, and it's never been in church either, by the way. These are like conversations that happen on Friday night, Tuesday morning. This is where we're sharing our faith. And so I really feel like God, hopefully, if we can move the church into sharing their faith, we could really see some dynamic revival, and not just, a pastor telling a group something. I always think about this, that if I gave you a choice, would you rather have the one guy telling 1,000 people something, or have the 1,000 people talking about it? I'll take the 1,000 every day.
1,000.
So that's what I'm hopefully trying to say. Hey, this is a priesthood. You can go out and you can share this. And in fact, it'll probably mean a lot coming from someone, even though the case of Phil is actually a preacher that went up there. But then Phil became that same thing and actually brought all these people. And then that was passed on to me, not from what he told me. I saw it. Yeah. So as I'm growing up, I saw that dude just over and over and over. And it's not that everyone comes to the Lord or even understands that. So, I mean, our lives can be testimonies. Yeah. Someone can see our family, which we've seen that with Dynasty, going, hey, man, you guys sit around, y'all pray together, and you get along, you live by each other, you work in business together. How does that happen? Boom. Yeah. I can tell you why. So true. I go back to 1 Corinthians 15, because here's what's the most important thing to us. On. Right.
That's good. Gosh, I'm so excited. I get to watch you live out this life. I'll get to watch you be a gospeler and mom and our family, and I'm so grateful for that, and that has massively impacted my life. And
you are as well.
Yes,
Because you
I
found
am. I am.
a way to
That's what I
share that.
stand
And it's
on.
not always just the big things.
Yeah.
So this could be even someone that, is like, I mean, it can be in any way
Yeah.
that you're sharing, and you
So
can
true.
always become,
Yeah.
learn that and get in there and do that.
But it's so cool because what you said, like what we're doing now is what we've always been doing. Like when I think about, speaking and baptizing people, I mean, I'm not just thinking about LO conference where, I get to do this to preach to a lot of people and baptize a lot of people, and it's amazing and it's exciting. That's great. But thinking about in 9th grade when I had a Bible study at the house and baptized people in our bathtub because I was like, this is dead to life, like getting so fired up and getting our school fired up and talking to the girls that everyone judged and thought were just terrible. And I'm like, well, let's tell them about Jesus, and then they're getting baptized in our house. And like, it's not like those are the ministry moments. That's what being a gospeler is. It's not being a pastor, just being a pastor. Yes, you can be that as a pastor, obviously. It's not being like a social media influencer who preaches about Jesus. Like it's the person who like sits across from someone at coffee and is like, hey, like you're struggling. Let me tell you about the good news, And so I just love that you're putting this book out because I love that you said, what if church structure wasn't just one person telling the thousands, but the thousands of people telling those in their lives? Like that is what revival is going to look like. That's whenever it's going to spark. That's whenever the nation will actually start to change and the world will start changing and look a little bit different. That light will start taking over the darkness. And so anyways, I'm just so excited for that and so glad that you wrote that book. And if you have listened to this story and this podcast, then you have a lot to look forward to. You have the Blind movie to go see next month, September 28th, and also to look forward to Dad's book coming out, Gospeler. I just think that this is going to be huge encouragement to you. If you're someone who is struggling or someone who you identify with in the story of the blind, I think one way to even, reach out to people who are struggling that you see and you don't know what to do is to invite them to the movie. Maybe that's like being the sister that Jan was to Phil. Hey, come see this movie with me. And maybe that can be the thing that opens the door for great conversation. So excited about The Blind coming out in theaters. Hope you guys love it. And Dad, thanks for being on the podcast today.
My pleasure.
And y'all, I want to give you a little bit more information about how to get a ticket. You can get early tickets at theblindmovie.com, which would help so much because however many early tickets we sell can help with how many theaters the movie gets to go into. Like we said, this movie is more than just a movie. It is a powerful story that we really believe is going to help change lives. And so go to theblindmovie.com, purchase an early ticket. It comes out September 28th. Go see it in theaters. And you can also find out how to bring this movie to your church at theblindmovie.com. We definitely want churches to see it, and we know this is going to be so powerful for your whole church family to get to witness together. So go to theblindmovie.com and find out all the information there.